Brave Little Ruby, written by Shannon Yeager, illustrated by Bojana Stojanovic. Chapter 1. Ruby's Story. Imagine you are sitting in a room with a group of children. A grown-up is going to read a book to all of you. In this room, we have boys and girls with light hair and dark hair. We have boys and girls with all shades of skin. When Ruby Bridges was a little girl, this was not possible. When she was little, she had to stay only with people that were African American. Many people did not believe this was right, kind, or good. They did not think that people needed to be segregated or kept apart because of the color of their skin. When Ruby was in first grade, she was one of the first African American children to go to a school that was built just for white children. Let's follow Ruby's story as she makes history. Chapter 2. Before. Ruby, Ruby, where are you? Little Ruby could hear her mother yelling for her from the back door of her grandmother's house. Jumping up from the garden, she ran towards Mama. "Here I am, Mama," little Ruby exclaimed. It was just starting to cool off a bit in September of 1958 in Mississippi, and 4-year-old Ruby had been playing with her cousins. "Say goodbye, child. It is time we left for New Orleans," Mama said as she gently wiped some dirt from Ruby's face. Ruby frowned as she was sad to leave the farm that her granddaddy worked on as a sharecropper. Her cousins all lived nearby, and she knew she'd miss them when her Mama and Papa moved her little family one state away to New Orleans, Louisiana. Papa didn't want to work as a sharecropper and had a job at a service station in New Orleans. Her family would have a fresh start, her Papa kept saying, but Ruby did not want to go. "Yes, ma'am," Ruby said quietly to Mama as she went to hug her cousins and grandparents. There were no tears, since Ruby would be back to visit, but she was sad. After a long drive, Ruby and her parents pulled up in front of a big house in the city. Ruby could hear kids yelling and cars honking their horns and lots of strange noises. It was hotter here than on the farm as well. Ruby pulled her teddy bear out of the car and slowly walked into the house. Ruby's family rented the front part of the house, and other families lived in the back. And upstairs. There was a bedroom for Papa and Mama, as well as a room for Ruby and her brothers and sister. There was a living room, too. Mama was excited about the kitchen. It had plenty of space, and Mama loved to cook. "Ruby, help me with this stuff," Mama said as she piled bags and boxes into the kitchen. "I will make a breakfast for dinner tonight to welcome us to our new home." Mama smiled her pretty smile. "Bacon, eggs, and grits. Yum! Could we also have banana pudding for dessert? Or sweet potato pie?" Ruby loved Mama's cooking, and she could tell that the kitchen was going to be her favorite room in their new house. As the weeks went on, Ruby began to like living in the city. Mama got a job at night, cleaning houses and hotels, and Papa worked during the day at the service station. Ruby, her brothers, and her sister grew close to one another. They loved to learn about God and listen to Papa tell them about how God is always there to protect them. As they said their prayers with Mama each night before she went to work, they knew that God could hear them. Chapter 3. The Test. Ruby was so happy to go to school. She loved to learn and worked so hard to read and to add and subtract numbers. Papa often told her how important school was, since he and Mama were unable to go. "Work hard, little Ruby, and learn all you can," he would say each morning as she left for school. It was a long way to school at Johnson Lockett Elementary, where Ruby went to kindergarten. Johnson Lockett was a school just for African American children, and Ruby loved her school. One morning in the spring of that year, Mama woke Ruby up early. "Get up, little Ruby. We need to look extra nice today. You are going to take a test, and I need for you to be ready." Ruby was not sure what Mama meant by a test, but got up and put on the pretty dress Mama had set out for her. She loved it, and it had a matching bow and nice shoes. "Mama, there are so many people here," Ruby whispered when they got to the testing room. Ruby looked around at the 100 or so kids in the room. All were African American, like her. "Hush, little Ruby, and try your best," Mama said as Ruby took a seat with the other children. Ruby picked up her pencil and started the test. It was very hard, and she wasn't sure she answered the questions the right way. They were tricky. Many of the children did not pass that test. It was made to be very tricky. Mama and Papa talked about the test that night when the children went to bed. "It was to be hard," Papa said quietly to Mama. "It was to be hard so that if our African American children don't pass, the schools can stay segregated. The white people don't want us in their schools." Mama shook her head sadly. "I just want Ruby to go to the best school she can," Mama said before she left for work. Well, Ruby did do well on that test. Very few children passed the test, but Ruby did. She was chosen to go to a new school, William Frantz Public School, for first grade. Little Ruby did not know that she would make history. Chapter 4. Brave Little Ruby. Ruby didn't get to start at William Frantz right away. Since some people were mad that African American children could go to their schools, they worked with the government to pass laws that would make it so that Ruby couldn't go to the white children's school. Finally, a judge named Judge J. Skelly Wright struck down all of those laws. He believed that everyone should have access to a good education, no matter the color of their skin. On Monday, November 14th, 1960, Ruby got dressed for school, taking care to look very nice. "Mama, why are you all dressed up?" Ruby asked. Mama just smiled. "I want to go to your new school too," Mama replied. Ruby was okay with that. She felt a little scared to start at a new school. As Ruby finished her breakfast, she heard a knock on the door. Mama jumped up and ran to answer it. "Let's go, ma'am," Ruby heard a deep voice kindly say. Ruby put her plate in the sink, and Mama got her purse from the chair. "Are you ready to go?" asked a second man, dressed in a nice suit. Ruby felt shy. Why were these 4 men at her door? "These nice men are United States Marshals, Ruby. They are here to give us a ride to school." Mama smiled her big smile. Ruby just looked up shyly and nodded her head. Ruby and Mama got into the car with the 4 men, and they started the short drive to school. When they arrived at William Frantz Public School, Ruby felt surprised. There were crowds of people at the school yelling loudly and holding signs in the air. Little Ruby did not understand that these people were yelling awful things, were angry, and did not want her to be there. "Mama, is it a parade?" Ruby asked. "Hush, Ruby," Mama said, and she quickly followed the U.S. Marshal towards the school doors. Ruby tried to look at the loud crowd of people, but the U.S. Marshals were all around her and she couldn't see. Once inside the school, Ruby and Mama went to an office and sat down. "Someone will see you shortly," a woman with short blonde hair said to Mama. "Wait here." The woman walked off and shut another door. Ruby looked around her. This school was big and very pretty with its clean walls and floors. It must be an important place to be so clean and to have men drive you to school and people outside trying to get in. Hour after hour, Ruby and Mama waited. People came into the office and then left with their children, one after another. Ruby heard a lot of yelling, and no one would smile at her even if she smiled at them. Ruby was sad. Was this a nice place? Soon, the U.S. Marshal came to see them in the office. "It's 3 o'clock, ma'am. Let's get you home," said the man with a small smile. Mama stood up and looked down at Ruby. She took Ruby's hand, and they followed the U.S. Marshal out of the door and back into the car. "Mama, the people are still outside of the school and yelling." "Mama, I don't understand," Ruby said softly. Mama didn't answer and shook her head. Chapter 5. All by Herself. When Ruby got home, she and Mama told Papa about their day. There were lots of people holding signs and yelling. I sat all day in the office, and lots of parents took their kids away and yelled at the principal, Ruby said as she ate her second bowl of banana pudding. Papa looked over at Mama and shook his head. He didn't look happy. "You are my brave little Ruby," he said, as he kissed the top of her head. Ruby smiled a big, happy smile. The next morning, the U.S. Marshals came back. Mama and Ruby hopped into the car and went to the school. The people with the signs were still out there, but Mama told Ruby that she should not try to read them. She and Mama prepared to sit in the office again, but instead, a nice woman brought them to a classroom upstairs. "Hi, Ruby. I am your teacher, Mrs. Henry." The lady with blonde hair sat down in a small chair near Ruby. "That is a very pretty dress. Did you get it just for this special day at school?" Mrs. Henry smiled at Ruby. Ruby looked at Mama, who went to the back of the room and quietly sat down. Ruby was scared to answer Mrs. Henry. She had never been alone with a white person before, and she was scared Mrs. Henry may yell at her like the people outside had done for the past 2 days. Ruby felt very shy and just looked at Mrs. Henry as she nodded her head just a little bit. "Well," said Mrs. Henry, "let's get started. What shall we learn today?" Ruby followed Mrs. Henry to the chalkboard and began to listen carefully to all that Mrs. Henry had to say. The day went by quickly. Ruby didn't leave that room all day, unless she had to go to the bathroom. While it took a bit of time to get over her shyness, she decided she liked Mrs. Henry. Each day that week, they did the same thing. They read books and played games. For the first 2 days, Mama sat quietly in the back of the room. On the third day, Mama held Ruby's hands in hers when the U.S. Marshals arrived. "Today, you must go to school on your own, brave little Ruby. I cannot go with you. Mrs. Henry will take care of you, and I will see you after school." "Yes, ma'am," Ruby said with a smile. She was not scared. Mrs. Henry was so kind, and they had fun learning reading, writing, and math. The only thing Ruby wondered was where all of the other children were. Weren't there supposed to be children at that school? She could hear some, and she could smell their lunch at midday. But why didn't she ever see them? Chapter 6. Other People. One morning, Papa didn't leave for work. He sat at the table as Mama made breakfast. He quietly said thank you when Mama put his bowl of grits in front of him. Ruby was scared. "Papa, are you okay?" she asked. "I will be fine, brave little Ruby," he answered. "Pass the butter, please." He smiled at Ruby and ate his grits. "Eat up, little one," he said. "You have learning to do." While Ruby put her shoes on and waited for the marshals to arrive, she heard a man outside say that her papa had lost his job. He was fired because the station manager found out that people were angry that Ruby went to the school for white kids. They said they would not come to his business anymore unless he fired Papa. Ruby was sad. What had she done wrong? Ruby went to school that day and every weekday after. She and Mrs. Henry loved their time together, so they were both there every single day. A few weeks later, Ruby got home to find boxes of gifts in their living room. "Mama," she said with a big smile, "what is all of this?" Ruby picked up a doll and a few pretty dresses and broke into a big grin. "People heard that you were going to school and that Papa lost his job. They wanted to be kind. Isn't this all wonderful?" Mama said with her big smile. "Now pick some toys for your brothers and sister. You need to share the gifts with them, too." Ruby started setting aside toys that the younger children would like. Papa came home, smiling, and said a kind man hired him as a house painter. Chapter 7. Ruby's Troubles. "Mama! Papa!" yelled Ruby. She jumped out of her bed, tears running down her face. "Ruby, what is it?" Mama asked, looking worried as Ruby ran into the room. "I had a bad dream," Ruby said quietly. She could not remember her dream, but knew that something bad had happened in it. Ruby's parents looked at one another over Ruby's head. The bad dreams had started a week after Ruby went to school and had gotten worse. "Did you say your prayers, Ruby?" Mama asked softly. "God will hear your prayers." Ruby nodded and started to pray. The next morning, Ruby told her mama that she didn't want a peanut butter sandwich. She wanted to eat in the cafeteria with the other children, then play on the playground. Mama just shook her head and kept packing Ruby's lunch. When it was time to eat, Mrs. Henry went to the teacher's room for her food. Ruby hid her sandwich in the cabinet. Maybe if she didn't have food, they would let her eat in the cafeteria. Each day, Ruby hid her sandwich until one day the man that cleaned the room told Mrs. Henry that the rats had found the sandwiches. Mrs. Henry decided to eat with Ruby so she wouldn't be alone. "Thank you, Mrs. Henry," Ruby said with a big smile. Bit by bit, Ruby stopped being scared, and the bad dreams went away. Chapter 8. Understanding. Later in the school year, when the spring flowers were starting to appear, Ruby saw other children in the school. Mrs. Henry could tell that Ruby was sad that she never got to talk to other children, and went all the way to the superintendent of schools to ask for Ruby to be able to play with the other kids. One day, a few kids were able to come to Ruby and Mrs. Henry's classroom. Ruby was so excited. The children looked at her, and she looked back at them. "Would you like to play?" Ruby asked a little boy. He looked at the floor, the desk, anywhere but at Ruby. "Nah, I can't play with you," he said. "My mama said not to play with you because you are black." Ruby's eyes got big. She did not get mad at the boy, as he was just obeying his mama. All of a sudden, Ruby understood what had happened this past year. The people yelling, the posters they held, her not being able to be around the other kids. It was all because she was African American and everyone else in the school was white. Ruby did not react with anger. She was not mad at the boy for what he said, but it did make her sad. Chapter 9. Later Years. The rest of first grade was a bit more fun for Ruby. The other children still came to her classroom. Ruby made a few friends. Not everyone was unkind because she was African American. School ended, and Ruby had all summer on her grandparents' farm to run around in the sun. When second grade started, there were no U.S. Marshals to bring Ruby to school. There were no people with posters outside of William Frantz Public School. There were even a few other African American kids at the school. But Mrs. Henry was gone. "Mama, what should I do without Mrs. Henry?" Ruby cried. Her new teacher did not talk to her like Mrs. Henry did, and was not often kind to Ruby. She made fun of the way Ruby spoke and had a harsh tone to her voice. Some of the kids laughed at Ruby as well. "Be my brave little Ruby," Papa said when Ruby talked about school. "You can study hard and learn from anyone, anytime." Papa always knew how to make Ruby feel better. Ruby went to school day after day. She tried hard on all of her work. She was kind to everyone, even those who were not kind to her. She worked hard at school, not because she wasn't as smart as her peers, but because she had to work harder. Since she was African American, she had to prove she had a right to be there. This didn't make Ruby angry, though. She chose to be strong instead. "I am brave little Ruby," she would say to herself if she got scared. "God hears my prayers and always loves me." The Ruby Bridges Foundation. Ruby Bridges went on to finish school, graduating from an integrated high school. After graduation, she studied travel and tourism and went on to become one of the first African Americans to work for a large travel agency in New Orleans as a travel agent. She continued this work for years, eventually marrying and having 4 sons. The family settled in New Orleans, the city Ruby had grown to love. In 1999, after her brother's death, Ruby went back to William Frantz Public School to drop off her young nieces. Disturbed by what she witnessed at the inner-city school and fueled by her desire to help all children reach their dreams, Ruby decided to take action. She became a volunteer at the school several days a week and encouraged other parents to become involved in their children's education by helping out at the school. Thus began the Ruby Bridges Foundation, an after-school program providing cultural arts classes for young students. As the program grew, Ruby extended it to include another program called Ruby's Bridges. This program helps children understand other cultures by performing community service projects. The Ruby Bridges Foundation continues to promote understanding of all people and cultures and to create change through education and bravery. We all have a common enemy, and it is evil. Ruby Bridges.
Find out why over 1 million parents have used goodandbeautifulbooklist.com to find clean, appropriate books. Check out the free book list now and dive into the world of good and beautiful literature.